Assalamu alaikum, shalom, and everything in between, and welcome to the premiere episode of A Muslim and a Jew Walk into a Podcast. I'm Wajahat Ali, the Muslim. We can't hear you. That means this podcast is already anti Semitic.
Thanks a lot, Waj. Why did you do that to my mic? Yeah. So, hi, Waj. I'm Jen Taub, the Jew, and we are so excited that you're here to join us for the world premiere of what promises to be the unholiest podcast in America. We're going to be talking about the Holy Land, God, current affairs, pop culture, eccentric family members, a little hummus, a little chai, and also, I'm hoping we have a kvetch of the week, or maybe a few kvetches. Who knows?
Jen Taub, the Jew. I'm so honored that you have joined me in this podcast and this conversation. And we promise our listeners, our loyal listeners, inshallah, that it'll be fun, it'll be diverse, it'll be substantive, and we'll always be honest. What this will not be, folks, is a Muslim versus a Jew in a podcast. I know some people want us to represent all their grievances and want us to solve all issues on this podcast and fight it out. I'm too old. I'm 43 years old. I have to stretch. I don't know if I can reach Jen all the way there in Michigan, but this is going to be a Muslim and a Jew enter a podcast and talk about issues, like Jen said, about faith, about politics, current affairs, culture, family. We're going to keep it diverse. And inshallah, we're going to have a lot of really fascinating guests who have already said yes. But I love a good origin story. And, the origin story of this podcast goes like this. First, there was God, and then God created humans, and humans created podcasts, and then two humans created. No, I'm just kidding. On the sacrilegious tip, but 4 years ago, there was this idea. I just thought it would be funny to say a Muslim and a Jew walk into a podcast. Nothing to do with Israel and Palestine. Just I thought it would be interesting to get two different perspectives. Me, the Muslim, a Jewish partner, a man and a woman, and just to talk about current affairs. We did this. We pitched it. Some people were interested. It was COVID. My Jewish partner, they were busy. I sat on it. And a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to our good friend, Mary Trump. You might have heard of her, folks. And I said, Mary, I have the show idea for Mary Trump Media. And she goes, that's awesome. She just heard it. She goes, that's hilarious. I'm like, yeah, but I need a Jewish partner. And she goes, what about Jen Taub? I'm like, Jen Taub is Jewish. And we get along. And so I sent Jen
Well,
this
we have
idea
until now.
until
So,
now. And Jen, I'm just really curious, what made you agree to it? Because you got back to me super quick.
well, you think I got back to you super quick, but I think Mary had warned me and had to like twist my
Ah,
arm. No, look, I wanted to have this conversation with you, Waj, because prior to October 7th, we were friends. And we had done, live shows together. We're part of the Nerd Avengers. And because we had that foundation, after October 7th, when everything, became really toxic, and I felt so paralyzed and fearful, and
mm,
so hopeless about what is going on, driving these wedges in communities in the U.S. and obviously the attack on Jews, and now the war in Gaza, the attack on Jews, and other Israelis, on October 7th by Hamas. But anyway, I thought I couldn't talk to anyone who wasn't Jewish for a while. I was very
mm,
insulated. And then I thought to myself, when I heard about this invitation, if we can't talk, if you and I, who are friends, can't talk, there's no hope. And
mm,
so as soon as I said yes, I have felt much more hopeful because I think we trust each other. We're not going to agree about everything. These are going to be hard conversations, but how do we move forward? How do we move forward and find peace both in the Middle East, inshallah, and also here at home, so we don't allow fanatics to drive a wedge. We don't allow, and I mean by fanatics, I'm speaking of the right wing Republican Christians who are trying to drive a wedge. I'm
yeah.
also speaking about interlopers who are creating extra agitation and violence on campuses. We don't want that to drive a wedge between us and allow it to create a situation where Donald Trump once again has the levers of power because people are so fighting among ourselves. So that's a long story about why I said yes.
No, and I appreciate it because, so much of it is connected to the issues we talk about on Nerd Avengers, right? We have a very fickle, folks, multiracial, multi-faith coalition that is attempting to fight back, and I think Jen agrees with me, fascism, global fascism, and authoritarianism. And this war in particular, this latest war that has lasted 8 months, as Jen said, what people don't really focus on is how white nationalists and white supremacists and people who do not like Jews or Muslims have deliberately exploited this issue as a divide and conquer strategy to go against this whole idea of a multiracial America, right? And to splinter our coalitions. And so a lot of this is connected, and we're going to be teasing this out through politics, current affairs, and yes, some lighthearted commentary because Jews and Muslims are also very funny, folks. If you can't cry, you have to laugh. But I deliberately, and for our listeners, I waited to ask Jen this question until this episode because I really don't know. So we're going to find out. I'm sincerely curious, Jen, about your relationship to both Israel and Judaism because I saw this really cute, nerdy photo of you, nerd, wearing a Star Wars shirt, sitting beside what seems to be like a Palestinian man. And it just always stuck with me. So I'm really curious. What is your relationship with Israel and Palestine and also Judaism, if you don't mind sharing? But you have to share.
Oh, that photo. Okay, so let me just say, I guess the question is about my relationship to Judaism and to Israel and Palestine. Let me start with the Judaism. I was born to an Ashkenazi Jewish family, Americans. My mother's first generation American. My and then the grandparents on the other side, first generation from various places in the world, were part of sort of the Jewish diaspora, dating back to the Pale of Settlement, Lithuania, and then like before that, according to 23andMe, somewhere in the Fertile Crescent. But anyway,
So a lot of matzo ball soup.
a lot of matzo ball soup. I am like a fiend for Jewish delicacies. I even like gefilte fish.
Oh
Don't
my
at me.
lord. Oh
So
my
the
lord.
picture, the picture, and I think it's in this sizzle reel as well. The picture of me that was from East. That was that was
Well
from
done,
East.
Kyle.
That was from Jerusalem, March of 1978. We were there. I was 11. I was there for my older brother Adam's after his bar mitzvah. That was my parents gave us a choice. Did we want to have a party for our bar and bat mitzvahs, or did we want to travel somewhere? And my older brother said, "Who needs a party? Let's travel." And we went to Israel. And I don't know if you saw, like you said, I think, the Star Wars shirt, because it's 1978 and I'd gotten that shirt in 1977. That was, the very first Star Wars
You're like
episode.
an OG nerd. You're
Yeah,
pure.
I love that shirt. Anyway, so the story behind that, though, we traveled to Israel right after there had been a terrorist attack on tourists of all things, traveling. I think it was a bus there, and a lot of our family members back home in Michigan, where I am now, about to move back to. A lot of our family back in Michigan was like, "You can't go on this tour. It's crazy for you to go to Israel." And my parents were like, "No, we're going." And while we were there, probably a few days after that photo was taken, we were staying up at a kibbutz sort of in northern Israel. And in the middle of the night, they woke up my father and brother. Remember, my brother's only 13, and they took him on a tour of the kibbutz to the bomb shelter because they were discussing a preparation. The IDF was planning to respond because there had been a strike from Lebanon in the north. So there was a lot going on at that time. And so my father was actually volunteered. He was a doctor to be part of the medical team if casualties were going to result. And fortunately, the weather was really bad, and Israel decided not to lob that retaliatory attack. So that's kind of what happened there. But I still remember that trip vividly. But that's the only time I've ever actually been to Israel. But like, can I turn the tables on you for a
Wait,
minute?
wait, wait. I have to
Oh,
ask this though.
okay.
How practicing are you, oh, Jewish co-faith, co-podcast host?
I love that you say practicing because you understand. I think some people who are Christian they think of Judaism or they think of religion as something about faith, right?
Mm.
But Judaism is really about practice, right? Practice, and then there's also an aspect of Judaism which is it's an ethnic and racial and cultural identity. So there's a lot to think
Peoplehood.
about, right? And there are people who can convert to Judaism. I'm not saying that can't happen, but it's a complicated mishmash of identity and culture, as well as practice. And so I was raised Reform. I now belong to a conservative synagogue. in my home now, we used to light candles and have challah every Friday night. I'm not like loving the gluten, and my kids started to rebel against having to do that. But I obviously, the high holy days, I always observe. I always observe Passover. We mentioned the matzah ball soup. I make killer like latkes. I'm not as fond of the hamantash, and I'm more savory, but that's and also I had a bat mitzvah 2 years after my brother, and I was actually the first female in my whole family ever to be bat mitzvahed.
And do you keep Sabbath?
I really wish I did. At one point, there are different ways of keeping Sabbath. The main idea is not to do any work or to create or destroy anything, right? So in theory, I shouldn't be writing, and I shouldn't be working, and I shouldn't be on my phone. But I could read books and I could go to synagogue. I really want to incorporate that, but it's really actually hard to live in a world, a secular world, because things you're supposed to be doing stuff on Saturday. What's worse than that, though, is at the university that I'm leaving now. Everyone, they don't, on Yom Kippur. Not only do they schedule things, but when I first joined the school, I got yelled at. I got nasty emails because I zoomed in my class once, or I canceled my class for Yom Kippur, and I got lambasted for doing that. So it's hard. It's hard to be an observant Jew, but I should stop making mistakes. Making excuses.
We need a rabbi to give a fatwa to allow TikToks for Jews on Sabbath, because Jen without TikTok now is like she's addicted.
Right. So I need a little wire around my iPhone.
If there are any rabbis in our chat section right now, and by the way, ask us questions. We're gonna Q&A at the end, but this is the origin story. We're laying the groundwork, and you asked me about my relationship, and
I didn't ask you. I said I wanted to turn the tables and ask you.
Oh, turn the tables, right. So here are the tables. I'm not Palestinian. I'm Pakistani. I'm a son of Pakistani Muslim immigrants. And a question that I often get sometimes when people are comfortable, and I get this from some Jews, is you are South Asian. Why do South Asians care about the Holy Land? Why do South Asians care about Palestine? You're not Arab. I don't get it. It's a sincere question. And it's Iru for TikTok. That's what Dara Ka said. Okay, thank you, Dara. We got it. I think people don't know this. And if give me a minute, let's just do some religious studies for a second, but we'll make it interesting. Why do Muslims, even though majority of Muslims are not Arab, care about this place called Palestine and Jerusalem? Excellent question. So the third holiest mosque for Muslims is Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, which Muslims say is on the Haram Sharif, what Jews call the Temple Mount. Third holiest mosque. First mosque is the you see Mecca in the Kaaba, the black cube. The second is the mosque of the Prophet Muhammad, also in Medina. Third holiest mosque is Al-Aqsa Mosque. Al-Aqsa Mosque was the original direction of prayer for Muslims. A lot of people don't know that. So many people know Muslims pray like 5 times a day. We face towards Saudi Arabia, right? Kaaba, the black cube. Our first direction of prayer was actually Al-Aqsa, and then it changed.
I did not know that.
Yeah, in addition to that, when it came to the Dome of the Rock, you see that beautiful golden dome in what we call the Haram Sharif, what Jews call the Temple Mount. I've been there. Muslims believe that the Prophet Muhammad took his miraculous night journey, went from Saudi Arabia to the Dome of Rock, from the Dome of the Rock, ascended to the heavens, however that happened. And there, he met the prophets, was given the command to pray. And in that area, then he led the prophets in prayer. Third reason why Muslims care so much about, I would say, Jerusalem is because of the history, the attachment. A lot of people don't know that we share prophets, And Muslims, actually, unlike Jews, believe in Jesus and Mary, so that area is attached to...
Whoa. What do you mean believe in? I believe they existed.
As a prophet,
okay.
Good
I think
edit,
Jesus was
edit.
a nice Jewish boy and had a lot of good ideas. I love this Sermon on the Mount, but go ahead. Continue.
And he was a great carpenter. Thank you for that edit. As a prophet. So that's the third reason. And the fourth reason is because a majority, not all of Palestinians are Muslims. There's a lot of Palestinian Christians, a lot of atheists also. And because for many people around the world, for many Muslims, right, the suffering of the Palestinians, the occupation of Palestinians, because there's so many Muslims and attached to this historical and religious significance, you combine it all together. And that's why so many people care. As far as I'm concerned, real quick thing I will say is when I grew up in the Bay Area, Pakistani Muslim immigrant family, very diverse communities. Believe it or not, Jen, My parents never sat me down and said, "You must hate the Jews." Right? It never happened in my family. My carpool. I went to an all boys Jesuit Catholic high school.
That's weird. Can I just interrupt? Because my parents sat me down and said, "Well, you're going to meet someone named Waj, and you're going to have to hate him." So that's a
Yeah,
different.
that was very. Yeah, they're like, by the way, randomly,
Oh,
there.
you're so sweet.
This don't say that. This was me growing up. That's me at 10 years old. This is me wearing Z Cavaricis, and I thought I would be cool. So my mom got me a silk shirt from Mervin's. Let's pour one out from Mervin's.
Oh my
This was
gosh.
the 80s, folks, when there was no Dove soap commercial. There was no Lizzo. There were only two types of kids: fat kids and normies. And this is me wearing husky pants every day for a fat kid was a jihad. It was World War III.
I'm
So
so
this was mine.
sorry.
This was me growing
I
up.
was a little chubby, and I got ridiculed. And I
No,
look
no, but
back at
this
those pictures, and
not
I
as bad
didn't.
as this. Not as bad as this. Uh,
Perhaps.
I went, but I wanted to say is I went to an all boys Jesuit Catholic high school, and just to let people know, this was my carpool: me, the Muslim, Grav Singh, the Hindu, Alan Loggins, the Black Christian, and Brian Rothbach, the practicing Jew.
I love
We
it.
never fought about the Holy Land. We never fought about monotheism, polytheism. Our greatest fights, folks, were reserved for what was the best Star Trek. And I said the next generation. I think Brian went for a Deep Space Nine, and we played video games. And here's a nerd question, and I'm going to ask you these two big questions before we talk about some heavy issues. And these might be some heavy questions. Gentile, super nerd. Of all the Star Wars movies, which one is your favorite?
You know, because I was actually alive, Waj, when the first Star Wars came out, which I know they call Episode 4. What do they call? What is the name they've given to Episode 4 now?
The New Hope.
The New Hope?
But Episode 4, it's the middle of the 9-part trilogy,
Oh,
right?
okay, so even though it's the first episode, which you all have renamed, I kind of feel like this is a little about Judaism. Like we have, the Torah, and everyone calls it the Old Testament. I have the same feeling about Star Wars. Star Wars Episode 1, which everyone has renamed Episode 4, is still, I believe, the original greatest episode. That and Rogue One.
Oh, so A New Hope and Rogue One. Very
Yes,
interesting.
yes.
And I would say my favorite 43rd anniversary of Empire Strikes Back. I gotta go Empire. In terms of
Really,
execution, in
really.
terms of aesthetics, I would say that's number one. New Hope is number two. And interesting that you said Jews. You see a lot of Judaism in Star Trek, in Star Wars. In Star Wars mythology, there's been a lot of fascinating articles about Sufism and spirituality, specifically with the
Oh,
Force, specifically with the Master
oh,
and the Padawan,
I see.
specifically about the inner power, the hero's journey. So there's been the spiritual dimensions that we should talk about in future episodes. Okay,
Well,
now,
hold one last
oh, go
thing.
ahead, go ahead.
Hero's Journey, of course, goes back to like the Epic of Gilgamesh. It also moves forward, which I'm sure you probably read because you study the great literary canon. And also, you can talk about the Greek hero's journey, and we can get really Jungian if you want to, but for another episode.
Yeah, we will. We'll talk about the hero's journey and how it ties into our mythologies, and also if there was no Moses, folks, there would be no Superman. Future episode. Let's inflame nerds. I think most of the chat right now agrees with me on Empire. Excellent. You have exquisite taste. Favorite Star Trek series. You can only choose one.
What? Come on. Oh, Star Trek. I thought you said Star Wars. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm not a Trekkie. Never have been, never will be. So I will not say a single word about it. When I was a kid, we called it Star Trek, and that will tell you about how much I know about Star Trek.
Folks, I will represent the nerds here, and I will say the next generation is the best. However, I will say out of respect, uh, oh, Mary Trump said that's disqualifying. Oh yeah, Mary. So Mary's in our chat listening right now. Mary, I'm gonna say the next generation is the best. However, with age, I will say the Deep Space Nine is the most underrated, and I'm gonna wait for Mary to see what she says. She just came in our private chat, and I think might cancel the show based on what I just said. Let's see what she says. But that for now is our Star Trek and Star Wars discussion. And this is how the show is going to be, folks. We're going to go back and forth on politics, religion, pop culture. But there is a heaviness. And the heaviness that we have to confront, and we will, is this current war. Some people call it a genocide. Some people call it a
That wouldn't
necessary
be me,
war.
but yes.
Yeah, some people say the leaders should both be tried for war crimes. Some
Some
people,
people, that would be the International Criminal Court, not just
which we will get to, which
some
we will get to.
people.
Some
Yeah.
people, I'm just teasing it out there. But with October 7th, Jen, and you talked about this. Uh, I saw some of your tweets, and I saw some tweets of friends of mine who were Jewish, who were very progressive. I might disagree with them here and there, but mostly, right? They wanted either self-determination for Palestinians. They were against Netanyahu. They realized the current course is destructive. But I saw some of their tweets for like a month after October 7th, and I was like, "Holy shit! Who are these? Like, what's happening?"
What do
Some
you
of my
mean?
friends,
Tell me what you
like
noticed.
it seems like they've gone genocidal. It seems like
Mm.
they crush them. They've lost it. And if you don't mind sharing with us, October 7th happened. Where were you? Where did you go for a month? What was your mindset?
So it's funny you say a month. It was a day. For
Mm,
me, and just to set this up, how you mentioned those feelings about the Holy Land, and like the we're both the diaspora. Like you have not, you don't have parents,
no,
grandparents who are from there, right? So we all have the same kind of core feeling about a place. But I have been someone, as an American liberal or leftist Jew, who has pretty much been concerned about, the sort of up until October 7th, people like Donald Trump, and I'm still considering him, but other people saying, how can you vote, how can you not focus entirely on Israel? And I'm like, don't be so anti-Semitic, the dual loyalty trope, right?
right.
Like I'm an American Jew, and that's what I am. Kind of
Which
like,
Donald Trump repeats almost on
right.
a weekly basis now,
So
by the way.
that was how I felt anti-Semitism. And other anti-Semitism in America, they're sort of like, are you guys communists trying to tear down America, or are you all like, running the media and have all the money and stuff like that, right? So that was the world and how I saw anti-Semitism in America at the time. What happened on October 7th was October 8th. And on October 8th, before Netanyahu's leadership even began plans to attack Gaza, I saw people, including Jewish friends, so it's not just people who aren't Jewish. I saw people that I know who I considered my colleagues, my allies, my comrades, tweeting things and writing things saying how this was a justified armed struggle. And by this, I mean taking people out of their homes in kibbutzim, this raping and attacking young women at the music festival, this bloody slaughter. I'm not talking about the parachuting in and trying to seek, liberation, trying to seek equality. I'm talking about the violent, bloody terrorist attacks aspect of it. And there wasn't, what I saw is a people not, if I had seen these friends or these colleagues or these people in the world seeking Palestinian autonomy and so on saying, oh my God, we denounce that. What Hamas did is atrocious. And instead, what I didn't see any of that. I saw denials of that women were sexually assaulted. I saw I saw this sort of overlay of, well, this is what you deserve if you're a settler, colonist, and liking it to, saying if you are even a Zionist, and to me up until that point, Zionist just meant someone who thinks Israel should exist, right? I didn't focus. It was like, if you're a Zionist, you kind of deserve to die. And so then and I embody, so I'm like a victim of sexual assault. I have a college age daughter who was about to go on a trip to Israel. My kid would have been someone at that dance, and so you can see it. You can see how I'm getting.
Yeah.
I physically was horrified, and then of course, then you say, well, what about Israel's attack? At first, I was kind of in this space of, oh my God, maybe these right wing people who were, Israel do or die, maybe these people who were pro Netanyahu. I don't like the settlers on the West Bank and I don't like discrimination, but maybe the people who told me when I was younger, the Palestinians don't want two states, they don't want freedom and equality, they just want to kill all the Jews. At that moment, that lie became a truth for me.
Mm.
And I went into the long epigenetic, they all want to kill us, going back to the Holocaust. And that was a place I was in. And I understand right now, and well before, now, but I don't look like what Netanyahu is doing. There is no crushing Hamas. The focus, and by the way, I was always and still am to this day, bring them all home. All of the hostages. I want to, I want to bring all the hostages home. I want a ceasefire. I want to end to the war. And I want rebuilding of Palestine. I want to figure out the long term. That's where I am now. But my first instinct was, oh my God. Because I was so angry. Because what I was seeing around me were people saying, well, you know, everyone deserved to die. That's how I saw it. And remember, right now, there are still hostages. There's still young women being raped and sexually assaulted. Okay, so that is the place I was at. Now, of course, I have, gone experienced all that trauma. And what I also see is there should be no collective punishment. This idea, some people are saying no one in Gaza is innocent. That's bullshit. If you have to tell yourself that, that means you have a heart because you couldn't stomach what is going on. Right? We're not, and also the biggest thing that bothers me, and I know the casualty numbers might be wrong. There's no question that not Netanyahu and his government are trying to starve the Palestinians. I won't use the word genocide, but I will use the words war crimes. I'm 100% in support of what the International Criminal Court is trying to do. And in their announcement that they have arrest warrants out for Sinwar, who is a leader of Hamas, and Netanyahu. Netanyahu, I've never liked him. He's a crook just like Donald Trump, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Oof. So thank you. So maybe if you're wondering what was going on with me.
No, I was. And I appreciate.
And that was going on with me. And can I just tell you, so many Jewish women that I know have been in communication and so freaked out about all of this. So it's because the line I always believed, well, being against Israel and Israel's policy doesn't make you anti-Semitic, but I have seen so much anti-Semitism come out, and the word Zionist, which people used to use to call, what's his name, George Soros, who pays for everything, right, supposedly, that
pays for this podcast also,
like the words globalist or Zionist. In my mind, when you use it the way it's been used, it feels anti-Semitic. So that's where I've been. But thank you for indulging me, Waj, and I promise I want to hear from you how you've been feeling, because everyone's been calling you an anti-Semite and all this other stuff, which you are not.
No, well, I mean, I appreciate you telling me that, and I appreciate you sharing with everyone, because again, this is the origin story. This is our first episode, and we're putting it all out on the table, and we're gonna unpack all this stuff in future episodes with more detail, right? But I noticed that on your Twitter that you were seeing certain things that I was also seeing, but not solely focused on. And I could see how it triggered you, and I could see, and I remember I was talking to someone. I'm like, "What's up with Jen? Like, is Jen okay? I don't think I can talk to Jen right now." And I don't know if you were okay. And so,
I was
but
not
then,
okay.
yeah,
I was
I
not.
could tell you weren't okay. And I'm like, I'm gonna have a long term. I have faith in Jen Taub. I have. I'm gonna come back to this, and I'm glad we did. And I'm glad we did, because I could see how that was triggering for you and where you were at that time. My take on that, and this is my take on this current issue as well, is that if you are against war crimes, if you are for civilian lives to be saved, if you agree with children that they should live a life free from bombs and murder and death, then you should have the capacity to condemn what happened October 7th, right? Because it was a terrorist attack on 1,200 Israelis. That does not take away from your condemnation of the occupation, does not take away from your acknowledgement of the suffering, of the enduring suffering of Palestinians in Gaza, who have been compared to, even before this war, compared to either living in a concentration camp or an open air prison, right? 2 million people. But you should be able to say that without any ifs, ands, or buts. That's wrong. Period. And not but what's happened in the past 7 months.
Stop for a second. That's exactly the word. If people had just said and. Okay, continue, Waj.
Yeah, and not but, what's happened in the past 7, now almost 8 months. The figures show 35,000 Palestinians killed. That's a UN figure of what they estimate. They've recovered, I think, 24,000 of the bodies. More kids have been killed in the past 7 months in Gaza than in all war zones in the past 2 years. The man-made starvation you talked about, 1.7 million displaced. Netanyahu, and I think we both agree, batshit extremist government that includes Ben Gvir, the national security minister. And for those of you who don't follow Israel politics, we'll put you up to speed with all these names. But Ben Gvir, Israel indicted him for inciting terror. All right, this guy's an extremist. I'm not just using that word lightly. Smotrich, finance minister, who refers to himself as a proud Jewish fascist homophobe. His words. So this is the government that we have right now in this moment. And for people who don't haven't been following Israeli politics before this war, Netanyahu had an approval rating of like what 20%. There were protests against him, just like Donald Trump. Corruption charges, might have gone to jail, and this war gives him a lifeline, if you will, Jen, to stay in power, but at the cost. This is my fear, and this is what I tweeted out after. I think I tweeted this out on October 9th, Jen. I said, as a person who came of age during the war on terror, 21 years old, UC Berkeley, student, protested the war on terror, protested for Palestinian rights during the Second Intifada at that time. I saw how this country lost its mind. I saw how people were traumatized. I saw how people in the need for anger and rage, the pain, uh, it created policies that were destructive. The war on terror, which I think we can all agree was one of the worst foreign policy disasters in America. And I think I tweeted this out, Jen, is that with this government, I see the same happening. That this moment of goodwill that the majority of the world had for Israel, as it should have had, because it suffered it's such pain, it will be evaporated very quickly because of what I saw as the genocidal rhetoric and eventual genocidal policies. And there's a difference of opinion whether or not people call it a genocide or not. I think right now it's 57% of Biden voters, according to YouGov, consider it a genocide. But it's all bad, folks. I think we can agree it's war crimes. And we're at this position right now where, when it comes to this podcast, and taking things back full circle, uh, we are seeing, Jen, as I predicted, the rise of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, both here in Europe. So who gets screwed? Palestinians, Israelis, Jews, Muslims, Arabs, and the weakening of this multiracial coalition. And there is a segment now that we're going to do every week called Current Affairs. We're going to talk about a current topic. And you mentioned ICC. And I want your take on what was happened earlier this week. The International Criminal Court, the chief prosecutor, came out publicly and said that he wants arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu, the Yoav Gallant, defense minister of Israel, and also 3 Hamas leaders. It's mostly seen as symbolic, Jen. No one really thinks any of these people will be held accountable. I want to give you my take first. I applauded it. I'm like, good. Speaking about Trump, no one's above the law, even the president, even the prime minister. I want accountability. There's no but, there's an and. If you think that Israel is committing war crimes, I think it is. And you think Hamas committed war crimes, I think I do. Yes, applaud ICC. But now we're seeing some rumblings that we know Biden didn't like it. And we're seeing some rumblings that U.S. might sanction the ICC. So I want your take on it. You heard my take.
Yeah, so, a couple things. As a law professor, I always like to make clear what my areas of expertise are and what they aren't, even before I still launch in and act like an expert. But to be clear, I am not, I'm not an international human rights lawyer, right? And had I known, I know Amal, Amal Clooney, but had I known that, being human rights lawyer would have, landed me George Clooney. I just kidding. As you know, my husband
Actually,
Michael.
Jen is not kidding. I want everyone to know that this is the third
Stop.
time I have heard Jen somehow pivot from a very serious conversation to her lust for George Clooney.
No,
This is
this
the
is
third time.
not true. My husband Michael is a total smoke show. Have you
You
met
love your
him?
husband. This is true.
He's gorgeous. He's an artist. He's super smart. He brought me one between shows my Diet Coke or my Coke Zero. So is that not love? He would come to the gulag for
But
me
he
with
would
that. He
understand
would
if
understand
you
it. Okay.
ditched him for one night for George Clooney. I get it.
Nah, I'm too old for that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's talk about what this was about. Just to be clear, International Criminal Court. Not all countries are parties to its jurisdiction. So there's this thing called the Rome Statute or the Statute of Rome, and only like 124 nation states have signed on to it. And interestingly, the Palestinian state has, the United States has not. But what this would mean is there's an arrest warrant out for these 5 people, right, including Sinwar of Hamas and including Netanyahu and Gallant in Israel. And the thing is, Israel hasn't signed on to it, so they can't be arrested in Israel. But if they travel to any of those 124 locations, in theory, they could be. The statement starts first with Hamas. And I recommend everybody look this up. What's very touching is the first part of it sounds a lot like what I was talking about, my reaction to October 7th and the ongoing treatment of the hostages. And then the second part, they talk about the starvation and so on and so on. I mean, I think that I agree that what is going on now on both by Hamas, am I saying it right? Hamas, I don't know, Hamas, and by Israel's government, I consider these to be war crimes. However, I consider most Israelis and most Palestinians want this to end. I think people want to have their lives and their families, and to the extent that this, I don't think of this as inflaming things. I think this actually helps, and
Yeah.
I'm surprised that the Biden administration is unhappy. I'm not sure how they can sanction. I don't know enough about how they can sanction a body that they don't think has jurisdiction, but maybe that's something I don't fully understand.
Well, what's really interesting, I want to bring this up because people forget that Zeteo, our Mehdi Hassan, our Friends New News Network, got a letter that a dozen Republicans a few weeks ago had signed. Republican senators had signed and sent to the ICC chief prosecutor, essentially threatening him if he came out with these arrest warrants, right? Like they literally went out of their way to threaten this person that we will come after you. And in spite of that, and in light of that, the fact that they still did it, I applaud him, Kareem Khan, the chief prosecutor. And again, I think morally, ethically, if you care about accountability, and even though I think this is going to be mostly symbolic because I don't think any of these people are going to end up in jail, even though they should, I think it's an important step, Jen. I think it's an important step.
Yeah, and what you mentioned is before October 7th, over the summer, there are huge protests against Netanyahu in the streets because he's trying to gain more power. This whole decision about trying to limit the power of their Supreme Court and so on. And so he is not popular, but they have to form this kind of coalition government, and there needs to be elections. And without some outside pressure, it's going to be really hard. And just to be clear, again, my focus is bring those hostages home. And Netanyahu, as far as I know, took a very long time, if he has ever spoken with the hostage families. Maybe he has. Apparently, I don't know if you saw the horrific videos the families of the hostages released, full videos of these young women, Israeli soldiers who have blood on their faces and so on. The families released that to put pressure on Netanyahu's government, and now he is reopening the negotiations to let the hostages out. I can't even imagine being those parents, being those family members. I don't think you can. I don't think I will ever, until this war ends, until the hostages are returned, we are all suffering, and that should be everybody's focus right now.
And we'll put a pin on this with the following before we move on, is that the negotiator, the representative of the families of the hostages, said that Netanyahu government did not approach them with the Hamas offer on October 9th and 10th for a ceasefire for release of hostages, which is why increasingly the families of the hostages have become more vocal in their condemnation of Netanyahu and are protesting him because they, and I agree with them, have realized, Jen, that I don't think Netanyahu cares about the hostages. He cares about himself, just like Trump.
Right.
They only care about themselves.
That's right.
We usually, our episode is going to be about 35,
and
40 minutes.
Let me say that too. These people depend upon each other.
No, yeah, they need each other. That's the thing. They're a partnership. They need each other to stay in power. And the people who get screwed are Palestinians, Israelis, and the rest of us, folks. We appreciate you all sticking around with us. This is our first episode. It's going to be a slightly supersized episodes, but stick around. This is where we're going to pivot, and it's going to give you a flavor of some of the fun stuff we're going to do in the spirit of this show. It's not Waj versus Jen. It's not a Muslim versus Jew. It's a Muslim and a Jew walking to a podcast. Jen Taub and I have compiled a top 10 list in the vein of Letterman, because we are going to give you exquisite pop culture references from the 80s and 90s. This is Wajen's top 10 reasons why Muslims and Jews actually have a lot more in common. Here we go. And I think Kyle, superstar, he did this in one day, folks. Let's give a golf clap to Kyle. We set this up literally
we love
like
you,
in 2
Kyle.
days. All right. Jen, lead it off with number 10.
Okay. What we have in common is diversity within our communities. We practice our faith in different ways. We participate in our respective cultures in a variety of ways, from super observant to less observant to what? And yet, we're often only associated with members of our communities who are the most extreme adherents. Particularly, unfortunately, people associate us mostly with those members of our communities who are focused on domination of women and male supremacy.
Number 9. Head coverings. Yes, Jewish men, like many Muslim men, we lose all the hair from the right places after our 40s and gain them in all the wrong places. But Muslim women, they wear hijab. Some of them do, some of them do not. Some Jewish women also wear head coverings. Some Muslim men, you'll see them wearing the kufi, and Jewish men, they wear the kippah. So, yes, some of us who are religious wear the head covering. Oh, Gen Wa. Jonathan says Gen Wa is better than Wa Gen. Jonathan, why are you Islamophobic?
I like
But
Wajin. I think it flows it flows better. Okay, so we were talking about shared ancestors. The father of all fathers is Abraham. Um, he is, because of Abraham, we're all cousins. I think of you as we're cousins from another great 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 grandmother, Sarah and Hagar, according to Scripture, and those boys, Isaac and Ishmael. And according to Scripture, Abraham made this covenant with God that we would his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the heaven. And there you go. We have Abraham.
uh, we have the best prophets, the OG prophets. Some of you might have prophets, but ours is the best, the greatest prophets. Uh, Number 7, the Holy Land. Believe it or not, we share the Holy Land. Muslims call it Haram Sharif, the noble sanctuary, which houses the Al Aqsa and Dome of the Rock. For Jews, it's the Temple Mount. Jews believe that inside the rock, in the Dome of the Rock, is a location where about 4,000 years ago, Abraham built the altar where he was planning to, but did not sacrifice his son Isaac. And for Muslims, of course, as you know, Dome of the Rock, as discussed, is the site of the miraculous night journey that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, took. That's according to Muslims. But it is a shared space, a shared location, unfortunately, a contentious location, but something that belongs, I would say, to Muslims, Jews, and Christians.
Okay, number 6, we have hospitality in common. You must be starving. Eat. We say goodbye, I don't know, many times, several times before actually leaving. You can see a little bit this here. We can't say goodbye, can we? Anyway, we also very want to give things to people. You like this? You take it. It's yours.
Actually, in all seriousness, Middle Eastern hospitality is remarkable. If you all have not traveled, and you should, and I think it will dispel so many horrific stereotypes you have. It's some of the most, like, especially I've gone to Jerusalem, Israel, Palestine 3 times. Like, literally, people have offered me free food all the time and hospitality. So number 6. Number 5, the Hamza hand plus the evil eye. The
See, I'm
evil
wearing it.
eye is a big deal. I think Jewish aunties, where they do the prayer and the I think that's what Jewish moms do. And for Muslims who believe in Nazar, the evil eye, and the protection against the evil eye prayers. You have the Hamza hand. I think for Jews, you all have the reference to Miriam, Moses' sister. Islamic
Yep.
tradition, it's the reference to Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad. But yes, we are the people who believe in the evil eye and prayers to ward off the evil eye. Don't Nazar this podcast. Give it love.
Okay, number 4. Let's talk about food. We have a lot of food issues. Okay, if you eat meat, it's got to be halal or kosher. This is about the respectful way the animal is treated, also cleanliness. And as everybody knows, we both have this thing about fasting. They do Ramadan for what is it, 30 days? We just do one day and complain about it all year, and then we look forward to breaking the fast.
I think Jews look at Muslims during fasting and they're like, yeah, we give this one to you Muslims. This one, and I think Christians are like, yeah, glad I'm a Christian. Fasting is usually when people are like, we'll tap out of this.
Yeah.
Number 3, pork. We actually, Muslims really love pigs. You know why? Because we don't eat them. All these people who think like somehow like if you throw pig's blood at us, like we'll explode like vampires. Nope, we actually like pigs. Pigs like us. But actually, according to many practicing traditional Jews and for Muslims, no pork. You can't eat pork. No pork, no ham, no bacon. No sausage, no pork chops, no pulled pork, no barbecue pork
No
ribs.
prosciutto. No.
No prosciutto. Jen, do you eat pork?
No.
Oh, I didn't. Oh, I did not know that.
I don't eat red meat or chicken or pork. I do though, sadly. I am a pescatarian. I was trying to be vegan-ish. But I really do need the protein. So yeah,
Give me
no
number two.
pork. Oh, two. Hummus. We love hummus. Savory, delicious, garlicky hummus, but never, ever chocolate hummus. It's a shanda.
I think everyone. I literally think we need some dark humor, folks, for dark times. The one thing that I've seen everyone agree on, I'm talking. I've been canceled by everybody. I've been in some tough rooms. I'm talking about hardcore right wing Zionists. I'm talking about liberal Jews. I'm talking about pro-Palestinian activists. I'm talking about Arabs, Muslims. The one thing we all
Everyone's
agree on.
canceled you?
Oh,
All of
everyone.
them? Oh
I've
gosh.
been canceled by everybody. But one thing we all agree on is chocolate hummus is a shanda. It is a
Absolutely.
sin, and we were going to dissect it a little bit more about why chocolate hummus is a sin in future episodes. But number one, folks, number one,
Number
believe it or
one,
not,
we can do this one together. Number one, we are both Muslims and Jews, minorities in the United States of America. Just to throw some data at you, according to Pew Research, around 70% of Americans actually identify as some type of Christian. And then another 23% have no religious affiliation at all. So we're talking about 7% left. And of the 7%, only about 1.9, a little under 2%, identify as Jewish, and only about 1% as Muslim.
Jews are 2% of the population. Muslims are 1% of the population. If you look at some polls, especially done by folks who follow MAGA, they think those numbers are inflated to 20 to 30%. And they think that we are literally, quote unquote, invaders trying to take over. This is part and parcel of both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. And I'm like, if we're trying to take over, we're failing. And the only part of the
Seriously.
Muslim agenda that has succeeded is now that we have halal meat, halal carts, and hummus. And also, the fact that there's chocolate hummus means that we literally are failing. We are failing our people and our ancestors.
Totally.
But I
Totally.
really appreciate that, Jen. Thanks for the Wajen or the Gen Wa top 10 list. And we're going to finish up with some fun topics here. It's going to be like this every episode. Look, this came up in a week. This is our first episode, our pilot. So be patient with us. But I think we're doing pretty well, Jen.
I mean, I'm
I think,
happy. I'm
yeah,
happy.
yeah, and I really appreciate you all sticking around with us. It's so nice to see the comments. But this is me imposing upon Jen. This made me laugh, and I said, Jen, I need you to do a segment on the show, a weekly segment. And the weekly segment, folks, and this is why they pay me the big money, is Gentiles, Gentiles, which is Jen Taub's favorite Gentile of the week.
Oh.
Graphic.
So good. Okay, so I was trying to be really positive, and I was like, I was going to be like positive, and of course, I love Joe Biden, but that's too like wave the flag, yay, yay. So, Gentile of the Week doesn't have to be someone good. It could be someone who's trying to actively harm the Jews and Muslims in America, or just anyone who's a freedom loving person. And I think I'm going to give Gentile of the Week. This award is going to go to none other than Justice Samuel Alito.
All right, so the worst Gentile of the week.
That's it. Samuel Alito.
I will agree with you that Samuel Alito, and is it Nikki? Samuel Alito, the worst Gentile of the week, Samuel Alito, and tying all the threads together, a white Christian nationalist who raised apparently two flags, synonymous with violent insurrectionists, and came out today with a shitty ruling that we discussed on Mary Trump's Nerd Avengers in the last hour, trying to gut the EPC. I have to agree with you. The Muslim gives you a +1 on your worst Gentile of the week.
So, Waj, I know you came up with that really cute expression for me, Gentile of the Week with a JEN, but you also, of course, saved something super funny for yourself. I love this. It is, okay, it's called your Waj's non sequitur, non sequitur.
Folks, we're dorks. Listen, life is hard. We need food humor. A non sequitur of the week is going to be something which might be tangential, but it's my kvetch of the week also, maybe something that's on my mind. And my non sequitur of this week for our premiere show, I was going to talk about chocolate hummus, but we already talked about it. But what I'm really interested in is you and Jen Rubin, the two Jewish Jens, were having a conversation after our last Nerd Avengers episode, and I was privy to it. For those who follow us, it was right after our show ended, and I was very curious about your mutual shared hatred for blueberry bagels.
Ah,
And then you went a step ahead and said like raspberry bagels are a sin. What can you educate me and all of us why both of you hate blueberries or raisins in your bagels?
so I know that my mother might be listening, and I think she likes cinnamon raisin bagels. So maybe I've got to carve out that category. But generally speaking, and I guess generally speaking, I think all bagels should be savory. The best kind of bagel, I mean, I like an everything bagel, but the best kind of bagel is going to be something like a sesame or a poppy seed bagel. But like the minute they do things, like blueberry bagels is the same thing as chocolate hummus. It's like
Wow, that's a bold. That is a bold fatwa. Then
if you want to have a scone or scone,
whoa,
or if you want to have a muffin, or you want to have pancakes for breakfast, you do that. But don't start putting sweet things or vegetables in bagels. And like
I
there's
think
this
you
thing,
went farther. I mean, the fact that
snickerdoodle bagels.
you
What?
compared blueberry bagels to chocolate hummus. That's.
Yes,
Whew.
it's bad. It's anti-Semitic.
I did not know you were an extremist when it came to bagels. I have a question for you, and it's a question that Benny Loco also has. What's your fatwa on everything bagel?
I love it. Why would I have a fatwa on everything bagel?
Okay, but no, because you said you were going for sesame. So is everything bagel kosher?
It's kosher, totally. Yeah, because
I
it's
love
got
the
garlic.
everything
It's got,
bagel.
yeah, it's the perfect bagel.
In the spirit of my universal tendencies, I go for the everything bagel. I have tried a blueberry bagel. I thought it was
Oh,
interesting. I didn't
what?
know it was part of the option of bagels. Now I'm aware. It was kind of
Not.
it disturbed me a bit. I ate it though. I was hungry. I apologize. But with that, folks, we went a little long today. Usually it's going to be 40 minutes, 35 minutes. Usually we're going to have a guest, but this was the premiere episode of A Muslim and a Jew Walk into a Podcast, a pilot. You got a flavor of our personalities. We got a flavor of how the show is going to be. It came together in like literally 3 days. Let's give it up. Let's give a golf clap to Kyle, who literally came up with the music, the video, the title screen in one day. Thank you to Mary for hosting this show, for
Mary
her
who?
Mary Trump, for her burgeoning Mary Trump Media. We're gonna add more podcasts, but we really appreciate her inviting us and having faith in us. And last but not least, I promised I will tell you Mary Trump's favorite Star Trek. She gave me a list. Here we go. According to Mary Trump, these are the best Star Trek series in order, folks. Number one, the original Star Trek. Number two, Deep Space Nine. Number three, The Next Generation. And she stopped at that. So I don't know what her fatwa is on the rest, on Voyager or the rest. But we will be back next week. We're going to give you a specific time, a specific date. Maybe for the second week before we figure out, it will be live again after a Nerd Avenger. We have a few guests who have already agreed to come on our show. Fantastic guests, the best guests, greatest guests who you will like. Every episode we're going to dial down on a specific topic, current affairs, and we're going to do some
With
fun segment
experts.
ideas.
It's not just going to be us riffing on stuff, like people who've written books and know things.
Yeah, actual experts, and we're going to tease these issues because unfortunately this is not going away. And we hope that you come along as part of our community. And what we're also going to do next time is we're going to do a Q&A section. Ask us questions. You have a Jew, you have a Muslim, you have a law professor, you have a recovering attorney, and Jen and I always promise, at the very least, we will always be honest with you. We will be straightforward. It will be no bullshit, and we will try our best to model the type of America that we want to see. Is that we could disagree with each other, but we all agree that our children, inshallah, have every right to be the protagonists of the American narrative. So we will be hopefully very respectful, even when we kvetch and if we fight with each other, but I don't think we will. And so, on behalf of Mary Trump Media, I'm Wajahat Ali, the Muslim.
And I am Jen Taub, the Jew.
And we will see you next week, inshallah, on A Muslim and a Jew Walk into a Podcast.